Rain fell from the dark sky, cold and heavy. The streets were almost empty. Only the sound of water hitting the pavement filled the air. In a quiet corner near an old shop, a strange figure sat on the ground. She looked like a woman, but not fully human. Her skin was pale with a soft silver glow. Her hair was thin like fine wires, and her eyes were large, reflecting the streetlights like mirrors. She wore torn clothes that hung loose on her thin body. Anyone who passed by could see she was starving. A small brown dog walked out from a broken gate and ran to a dirty bowl placed near the wall. The woman looked at the bowl, her hands shaking. She waited until the dog finished drinking the rainwater collected inside. Then she pulled the bowl closer and began eating the leftover food stuck at the bottom. Her fingers scraped the sides, desperate for every small piece. The dog tilted its head, confused but not angry. It was as if it understood her hunger. Across the street, a man named Daniel was closing his shop. He was tall, with tired eyes, wearing a heavy coat to protect against the cold rain. He saw the strange woman crouched near the dog at first. He thought she was just another homeless person, but when the light from his shop touched her face, he froze. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her skin looked wrong. Not wrong in an ugly way, but wrong in a way that said she was not from here, not from Earth. Daniel stepped closer, his boots splashing in the puddles. "Hey," he called softly, not wanting to scare her. The woman turned her head slowly. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes were filled with something between fear and hope. Daniel's heart tightened. She looked like someone who had lost everything. He took a deep breath and walked across the street. When he reached her, he knelt down. "You're freezing," he said, his voice gentle. The woman blinked, and this time she whispered a word. "Hungry." Her voice was weak, almost broken. Daniel looked at the dog's bowl and felt a sharp pain inside. No one should have to eat from an animal's dish, not even someone not human. "Come," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, looking at his hand as if it were dangerous. Then slowly she placed her cold fingers in his. Daniel stood and led her toward his shop. The warmth inside hit her like sunlight. Steam from the small kitchen in the back curled through the air. Daniel sat her at a table and moved quickly to prepare something: a bowl of soup, some bread, and hot tea. When he placed the food in front of her, she stared at it for a long moment. Then she began to eat. Fast at first, then slower. Her eyes closed as if she had forgotten what real food tasted like. Daniel didn't ask questions yet. He could see her exhaustion. Her shaking hands, whoever she was, wherever she came from. This was not the time to push. He poured more tea, letting her drink in silence. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, for the first time that night, there was warmth. After some time, the woman spoke again. Her words were broken, strange. Not from here," she said, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded slowly. "I figured," he replied softly. She looked at him, searching for fear in his eyes, but found none. Instead, she found something she had not felt in a long time: kindness. There was a loud sound outside, like a distant thunder. The woman's eyes widened in fear. Her hands gripped the table. Daniel turned to look, but the street was empty. When he looked back at her, her face had gone pale. "They find me," she whispered. The air in the room seemed to grow colder. Daniel realized this was not just a lost traveler or a hungry stranger. This was someone running from something or someone dangerous. Before he could ask more, the lights flickered. The sound outside grew louder, almost mechanical. The woman's breathing quickened. Daniel's instincts told him this was not just bad weather. Something else had arrived, and it was looking for her. The sound outside grew sharper, cutting through the rain like blades. Daniel's shop felt smaller now, the warm air suddenly heavy. The woman, still shaking from hunger and fear, turned her head toward the door. Her silver-glow eyes reflected the flickering lights. She spoke again, her words broken but urgent. They follow. Not safe here. Daniel moved closer, lowering his voice. Who's following you? But she shook her head. No. Speak. They hear. Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel didn't fully understand, but he could tell she wasn't speaking in riddles. She was warning him. The noise outside was no longer far away. It came in bursts, heavy steps, strange hums, and an echo like metal on wet stone. Daniel walked to the window and peeked through the blinds. At first, he saw nothing but the rain-soaked street. Then, in the shadows between buildings, a figure moved. It was tall, wrapped in something that shimmered when light touched it. The figure paused, head tilting like it was sniffing the air. Daniel's stomach tightened. Whatever it was, it wasn't human. Behind him, the woman stood. Her legs trembled, but she kept her eyes fixed on the window. "Hunter," she whispered. Daniel turned toward her. "They're here for you, aren't they?" She gave a slow nod. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale. The lights in the shop flickered again. Daniel knew the old building often lost power in storms, but this felt different. The hum outside matched each flicker. He backed away from the window. "Come with me," he said. He moved to the back door, leading her into the small storage room. Boxes of supplies lined the walls. A faint smell of oil and dust filled the air. "This way," he whispered, pushing open another door that led to the alley. But the alley wasn't empty. Two more tall shapes stood in the rain, their heads turned slowly toward him, eyes glowing faintly blue. One of them raised a hand, and Daniel felt a pressure in the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. The woman grabbed his arm and pulled him back inside. "Not that way," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel locked the door, his mind racing. They were trapped. From the front of the shop came a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times, Daniel froze. No customer would knock like that at night. The woman stepped backward until she was against the far wall. Her eyes never left the door. "They send voice," she whispered. Daniel didn't know what that meant until he heard it. "Give her to us," a voice called from outside. It wasn't loud, but it sank into the air like poison. It was deep, smooth, almost calm. "You do not understand what she is." The voice continued. Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced at her. She looked terrified, but also ashamed. Danger." She said quietly, "You help me." "They hurt you." Daniel crouched in front of her. "I don't hand people over to strangers in the rain," he said firmly. Her eyes filled with something that might have been tears. She shook her head slowly. "Not people," she said. "Hunters kill. No law." The knock came again, sharper this time. Daniel knew he had to act fast. He stood, grabbed a flashlight from the counter, and motioned for her to follow. There was one more way out, through the basement. It was dark, cramped, and led to a tunnel that connected to the next block. It wasn't safe, but it was better than staying. They moved quickly, Daniel unlocking the basement door and leading the way down the narrow steps. The smell of damp wood and rust hit them. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the weak light from above barely reached the bottom. Daniel clicked on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. The woman followed close behind, her bare feet silent on the stairs. From above came the sound of breaking glass. Daniel's heart jumped. They were inside. "Go," he whispered. They moved faster, reaching the far wall where an old iron door stood. Daniel pulled it open with effort, the hinges screaming in protest. Beyond was the tunnel, narrow brick walls wet with moisture. The air was cold and stale, but at least it led away from the shop. They stepped inside, Daniel closing the door behind them. The tunnel stretched into darkness as they walked. The woman spoke in a low voice. "They follow long. many worlds. No stop. Daniel frowned. Why? What do they want from you? She hesitated, then answered, Not from me. From you. Her words made Daniel stop. From me. I don't even know them. She shook her head. They want your world. I run. Warn. The flashlight beam trembled in his hand. This wasn't just about her survival. It was about Earth, behind them, in the distance. A soft metallic echo rang through the tunnel. The hunters were coming. Daniel and the alien woman exchanged a look. No words were needed. They began to run. The tunnel was narrow and wet. Their footsteps echoed, mixing with the distant metallic sounds behind them. Daniel's flashlight beam shook as they ran, throwing moving shadows on the brick walls. The woman kept glancing over her shoulder, her breath quick and uneven. They close, she whispered. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight. Then we move faster, he said. But the tunnel wasn't made for running. The ground was uneven. Pools of cold water splashed around their ankles. Every step seemed to echo too loudly. Daniel knew the hunters could follow the sound. He tried to think of turns or side passages. But the tunnel was straight, like it wanted to lead them somewhere. Is this tunnel safe? Daniel asked between breaths. The woman shook her head without slowing. Safe. No, only less dead. Daniel didn't like that answer, but he didn't argue. Behind them, the metallic sound grew louder. It was a strange rhythm, 2 steps. Then a pause, then a sharp click like claws on stone. The sound carried in the cold air. The woman looked over her shoulder again, her silver eyes reflecting fear. They fast now, she said. Daniel felt the urge to turn and shine the light, but he didn't. He knew some things were better not to see until you had to. They reached a curve in the tunnel. As they turned it, the light revealed something unexpected. An old metal gate. Rusted but still standing. Beyond it, the tunnel dropped into darkness. The woman froze. No more path, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. Shining the light through the bars, there was a ladder bolted to the wall, leading down the drop. Looked deep. Where does it go? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, down. To water. To place they don't go. That was all Daniel needed to hear. He pushed at the gate, but it wouldn't move. The T's were locked tight with rust. Behind them, the hunter's sound grew closer. The woman pressed her hands against the gate. Her skin glowed brighter, and a faint humming sound filled the air. The metal began to shake. Daniel stepped back as the old gate cracked and bent. Her strength was surprising for someone so thin. They squeezed through and reached the ladder. Daniel went first, holding the flashlight in his teeth as he climbed down. The ladder was slippery, the metal cold against his hands. The smell of salt and damp stone filled the air. The woman followed, her movements quicker than his. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a wide underground chamber. Water filled half the floor, dark and still. Old pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping slowly. Which way now? Daniel asked. The woman pointed to a low archway across the water. Daniel sighed. Of course, it's across the water. He stepped in. It was icy cold. The woman followed. Moving silently halfway across, Daniel looked back. The ladder above was empty. Maybe the hunters had lost them. Then a sound came, not from above, but from the water. A slow ripple moved across the surface. Daniel froze. What's in here? He asked quietly. The woman's eyes darted to the shadows. They not follow here. But other things do. Something brushed Daniel's leg. He forced himself not to panic and kept moving. The archway was close now. They stepped through and into another tunnel. This one was different, warmer, with faint lights glowing along the walls. Strange symbols were carved into the bricks. The woman touched one as they passed. Old path, she said, before your city. Before your kind, Daniel tried to ask more, but a sudden sound behind them made him turn. A tall shadow filled the archway. It wasn't a hunter. It was bigger, bulkier. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. The water rippled around its legs. Its eyes glowed faint green. The woman grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him forward. No fight. "Run," she said. They sprinted deeper into the lit tunnel. The thing followed, its heavy steps shaking the ground. The glow from the walls flickered, as if reacting to its presence. Daniel felt the air grow warmer the further they ran. The tunnel widened into a chamber filled with strange stone pillars. Each one was covered in carvings, glowing faintly. The woman stopped in the center and pressed her hands to the floor. The glow from the carvings brightened. The chasing creature stopped at the edge, hissing loudly. It stepped back, as if the light itself was dangerous to it. Daniel stood frozen. "What is this place?" The woman looked up at him. "Safe. For now," she said. Her glow dimmed, and she collapsed to her knees. Daniel knelt beside her. "You're hurt," he said. But she shook her head. "No. Just weak." Far away, the sound of hunters echoed again. Daniel realized their safety might not last long, but for the moment, in this strange underground chamber, they had a chance to breathe. The woman opened her eyes slowly. "We must go higher." Before they closed the net, Daniel didn't know what close the net meant, but from her tone, it wasn't good. He helped her stand somewhere above them. The world was still unaware of what was coming. The underground chamber was silent except for the sound of dripping water. The soft glow from the carved pillars cast long shadows, making the place feel alive. Daniel stood still, catching his breath. The woman sat on the floor, her silver eyes reflecting the light. Her breathing was steadying now, but her face looked pale. Daniel wanted answers. "You said they're after me." "After my world," he began. "Why? What do they want?" She didn't speak right away. Her gaze moved to the carvings on the nearest pillar. "They want roots," she said finally. Daniel frowned. "Roots." She nodded slowly. "This place."
Old.
"Older than your cities."
Older.
"Than your seas." Her hand touched the stone, tracing the glowing lines long ago. "My kind came here not to rule, to hide." "We made a map." Daniel stepped closer. "A map to what?" She turned her head toward him, to the gates. The word sent a small shiver down his spine. "What gates?" he asked. Her voice was low, almost afraid. "Places between worlds. They can move armies through them." Daniel looked around the chamber again. The pillars were arranged in a perfect circle. Lines ran from one to another, meeting in the center where she now sat. It wasn't just decoration. It looked like a diagram. "You're saying this is a map of gates hidden under the city?" She nodded. "Your world has many. They sleep, but hunters want them awake." The air felt heavier after her words. Daniel tried to imagine what many gates meant. If even one opened and something came through. He shook the thought from his head. "So they're chasing you because you know where these gates are?" Her silver eyes locked onto his. "I carry the key." Before Daniel could reply, a faint hum filled the air. It came from the tunnel they had entered through. The woman stood, her glow returning faintly. "They near," she said. Daniel clenched his fists. "We can't stay here then." She shook her head. "Not yet. I must take from here." She walked to one of the pillars and pressed her palm against it. The carvings pulsed brighter, and a thin strand of light moved along the stone. Daniel watched as the light formed a small sphere in her hand. It floated for a moment before sinking into her skin. When she pulled her hand away, the glow in the pillar faded slightly. She swayed on her feet, but didn't fall. "Now we go," she said. They headed toward a smaller tunnel on the far side of the chamber. This one sloped upward, the air becoming warmer with each step. The walls were smoother here, and the glow came from faint crystals embedded in the stone. Daniel touched one. As he passed, surprised by the gentle heat it gave off, the woman noticed. Old energy. From before your son was born, she said. Daniel didn't know if she meant it literally. But he decided not to ask. Halfway up, they heard another sound. Not the hunters. This was sharper. Like metal scraping against rock, Daniel slowed. The woman stopped too, from around the bend ahead. A tall shadow moved. It wasn't a hunter, and it wasn't the green-eyed creature from before. This one wore armor that looked like it had grown from its own body. Its head turned toward them, and Daniel saw that it had no mouth, only a flat, smooth surface where a face should be. The woman's glow brightened. "This is guard," she said. "Of what?" Daniel asked. She didn't answer. The guard stepped closer. Its movements slow but deliberate. Daniel felt a deep vibration in the floor with each step. When it stopped a few meters away, the crystals in the walls dimmed. The woman raised her hands, showing her empty palms. The guard tilted its head, then stepped aside. Daniel blinked in surprise. Just like that. She gave a small nod. "They know me. They know what I carry." They passed the guard and continued up until the tunnel opened into another chamber. This one was smaller, with a single pillar in the center. On its surface was a carving of a circle split into 3 parts. The woman stepped forward and touched the symbol. It began to rotate slowly, stone grinding against stone. A thin shaft of light broke through from above. Daniel shielded his eyes as the top of the chamber opened like a hatch. Cold night air poured in. "Up," she said. They climbed through the opening and found themselves in a deserted lot. Weeds pushed through broken concrete. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of storm. In the distance, the city lights glowed faintly. Daniel turned to her. "So, what now?" She looked toward the skyline, her face unreadable. "They will come for me again. But now, they know you are with me." Daniel let out a slow breath. "Then, I guess I don't have a choice." She met his eyes. "No, you don't." Somewhere in the city, a low hum began to rise. The hunters were still searching, and Daniel realized their night was far from over. The night air was cold against Daniel's face. He looked across the empty lot, the broken concrete shining under the weak glow of a street lamp. The city felt quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the heavy silence before a storm. The woman stood beside him, scanning the shadows with her glowing eyes. "They know now," she said softly. "They will come here soon." Daniel took a deep breath. "If they're coming, we should be ready." She tilted her head at him. "You want to fight hunters? They were killing long before your kind could make fire." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Maybe. But they've never tried it here. On my streets," she didn't argue. Instead, she followed as Daniel crossed the lot toward a side street. It was lined with old warehouses, most abandoned. One of them still had lights in the windows. Daniel pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Inside, 3 men sat at a workbench, repairing an old motorcycle. One of them looked up. "Daniel, what the hell are you doing out here?" Daniel gave a quick nod. "Charlie, I need your help." Charlie stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Help with what?" Daniel stepped aside so they could see the woman. Her silver eyes caught the dim light, and the room went silent. "She's in trouble," Daniel said. "There are people, things after her, and they're coming here." Charlie frowned. "You're not making sense." "I don't have time to make sense." Daniel said, "We have maybe minutes before they arrive, and when they do, they won't care who you are." The men exchanged uneasy looks. Finally, Charlie sighed. "All right. What do you need?" Daniel scanned the workshop. Anything loud, bright, or dangerous. Charlie grinned faintly. Now that we can do. They moved fast, pulling tools and supplies from the shelves. One man set up a welding torch. Another grabbed a crate of metal pipes. Daniel found a stack of road flares and tossed them into a bag. The woman watched all of this quietly. These things will not stop them, she said. Daniel gave her a half smile. Maybe not, but it might slow them down long enough for us to move. A sound outside froze everyone, a low mechanical hum. The lights in the workshop flickered. They're here, she whispered. Daniel nodded to the men. Kill the lights. The room went dark, lit only by the faint glow from her skin. Charlie loaded a heavy wrench into his hand like it was a weapon. The first shape appeared in the doorway, tall, thin, its glowing blue eyes cutting through the dark. It stepped inside slowly, scanning the room. Daniel lit a flare. The sudden red light flooding the space. The hunter stopped for a fraction of a second, its head tilting now. Daniel shouted. Charlie swung the wrench hard into the hunter's side, the metal ringing out on impact. The creature staggered but didn't fall. Another man hit it with a burst from the welding torch, sparks showering its armor. The hunter hissed, stepping back toward the door, but more shapes appeared outside. Daniel grabbed the woman's arm. Back door. They ran through the workshop. The others closed behind. The hunters followed, their movements fast and unnervingly precise. One reached out, its hand grazing Daniel's coat. But Charlie slammed the door shut behind them. The sound of metal bending told Daniel it wouldn't hold for long. They spilled into an alley, lit only by moonlight. Daniel pulled 2 more flares from the bag and tossed one to Charlie. Light it and throw it when they come through. The woman pointed toward a fire escape on the side of a building. Up, she said. Daniel climbed first, the metal rattling. Under his weight, the woman followed, moving like she had done this 100 times before. From the rooftop, they could see the hunters entering the alley. The flares lit their armor in a harsh red glow. Daniel realized something. They moved slower in the flare light, as if the brightness disrupted them. He shouted down, "Keep the lights on them." The men below lit every flare they had, tossing them into the path of the hunters. For a moment, it worked. The creatures slowed, their movements jerky, but then one of them raised an arm, and the nearest flare fizzled out. Another died, then another. They adapt, the woman said, her voice grim. Daniel's mind raced. If light slowed them, they needed something brighter, something stronger. He looked across the rooftops at the power lines stretching toward the city center. Can you find us a way there? He asked her. She nodded. Yes. But they will follow. Daniel looked down at the men below. You've done enough. Get out of here. Charlie shook his head. You kidding? We're coming. Daniel didn't have time to argue. Fine, but stay close. The woman led them across the rooftops. Below, the hunters moved through the streets, their glowing eyes scanning every shadow. One of them looked up, and for a moment, Daniel felt the weight of its gaze. It didn't need to speak. The promise in that look was clear. It would not stop. They reached the edge of a rooftop overlooking a substation. Tall transformers buzzed softly, surrounded by a fence topped with barbed wire. The woman crouched, her glow dimming. This place can make light enough to hurt them. Daniel grinned. Then let's make it shine. The substation hummed in the night. Tall transformers stood like silent giants, their wires stretching into the darkness. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Daniel crouched beside the woman, his eyes scanning the fenced yard. Can we use it? He asked. She nodded slowly. Yes. But must be careful. Too much will burn you. Charlie and the other men climbed onto the rooftop behind them. One of them whistled low. That's a lot of power, he said. Daniel turned to them. If we can push it through the ground and the fence, maybe we can hit the hunters before they get close. Charlie smirked. Sounds crazy. I'm in. The woman moved to the edge of the roof and studied the layout of the yard. There, she said, pointing to a control shed near the center, inside. Controls for flow. Daniel followed her gaze. How do we get in? She looked at him with a faint smile. You run faster than them. They dropped down into the alley. The fence loomed over them, topped with twisted wire. Charlie found a section where part of the mesh was loose. He pulled it back, the metal groaning. Daniel slipped through first. The woman closed behind. The others followed, inside. The sound of the humming transformers grew louder. The woman led them straight to the shed. Its door was locked. But a quick hit from a metal bar broke it open. The interior was small, lined with switches and heavy levers. Dust floated in the air. The woman stepped forward, running her fingers over the controls. These can push the power, she said, but must aim, or it will not reach them. Daniel glanced out the small window. The hunters were coming down the street, moving fast and silent. He turned back. Then aim it at the fence. The woman began moving switches in a careful sequence. Lights on. The panel flickered. A low rumble passed through the ground. Charlie stood by the door, gripping a wrench like a club. They're almost here, he warned. Daniel ran to the yard's gate and swung it open. The hunters entered, their blue eyes glowing in the dark. They stepped forward slowly, not yet sensing the danger. Daniel backed away toward the shed. The woman's voice came sharp from inside. Now? Daniel grabbed the largest lever and pulled it down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fence lit up with a blinding flash. Low white arcs of electricity jumped from the metal. The nearest hunter jerked violently, its body convulsing. Another tried to step back. But the charge leaped from the fence into the wet ground. The air filled with the sharp crack of power and the smell of burning metal. Charlie whooped from the doorway. That's what I'm talking about. But the victory lasted only seconds. One of the hunters dropped to the ground, still twitching. The others staggered but didn't fall. The woman's voice was urgent now. They adapt. Again, Daniel's stomach sank. Then we hit them harder. The woman adjusted more controls. The hum from the transformers rose to a deafening pitch. Daniel could feel the vibration in his bones. Outside, the hunters were moving again, slower but relentless. Their armor now glowed faintly, as if absorbing some of the energy. Suddenly, one raised its arm toward the shed. A beam of blue light shot forward. Slicing through the wall, sparks rained down, and Charlie dove aside. Daniel grabbed the woman's arm. We can't stay in here. She looked at the controls one last time and pressed her palm flat against the main panel. Her skin glowed brighter, and the lights in the shed flared outside. Every transformer erupted in a burst of lightning. The hunters staggered again, their movements breaking apart into jerks and spasms. The ground shook as one of them collapsed completely, its body smoking. Go. The woman shouted. They ran from the shed toward the far fence. The energy still crackled in the air, making every hair on Daniel's arms stand up. Charlie found another weak section of the fence and tore it open. They spilled out into a side street, gasping for breath. Behind them, the hum of the substation began to fade. Daniel looked back in time to see two hunters still standing. Damaged, but not destroyed. They're not stopping, he said. The woman shook her head. They will follow until I am gone. Or until they are. Charlie wiped sweat from his brow. Then we find a way to finish them. Daniel glanced at the woman. Can we? She hesitated, then nodded once. Yes, but we need the other gates. Daniel frowned. Other gates? As in, more of those things underground. She met his gaze. Yes. But some gates are weapons, made to protect, not to open. The sound of metal footsteps echoed faintly down the street. The hunters were coming again. Daniel turned toward the city. Then we find one of those gates, and we use it. The woman's glow brightened slightly. "You speak. Like my people did." Before we lost our home, Daniel gave a small, grim smile. "Maybe your people never had humans on their side." They started moving again, slipping into the maze of streets. The rain had begun to fall once more, hiding. Their tracks, somewhere ahead, lay a hidden gate, and maybe, just maybe, the first real chance to turn the hunt around. The substation hummed in the night. Tall transformers stood like silent giants, their wires stretching into the darkness. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Daniel crouched beside the woman, his eyes scanning the fenced yard. "Can we use it?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes. But must be careful. Too much will burn you." Charlie and the other men climbed onto the rooftop behind them. One of them whistled low. "That's a lot of power," he said. Daniel turned to them. "If we can push it through the ground and the fence, maybe we can hit the hunters before they get close." Charlie smirked. "Sounds crazy." "I'm in." The woman moved to the edge of the roof and studied the layout of the yard. "There," she said, pointing to a control shed near the center, inside. "Controls for flow." Daniel followed her gaze. "How do we get in?" She looked at him with a faint smile. "You run faster than them." They dropped down into the alley. The fence loomed over them, topped with twisted wire. Charlie found a section where part of the mesh was loose. He pulled it back, the metal groaning. Daniel slipped through first. The woman close behind. The others followed, inside. The sound of the humming transformers grew louder. The woman led them straight to the shed. Its door was locked, but a quick hit from a metal bar broke it open. The interior was small, lined with switches and heavy levers. Dust floated in the air. The woman stepped forward, running her fingers over the controls. "These can push the power," she said, "but must aim, or it will not reach them." Daniel glanced out the small window. The hunters were coming down the street, moving fast and silent. He turned back. "Then aim it at the fence." The woman began moving switches in a careful sequence. Lights on. The panel flickered. A low rumble passed through the ground. Charlie stood by the door, gripping a wrench like a club. "They're almost here," he warned. Daniel ran to the yard's gate and swung it open. The hunters entered, their blue eyes glowing in the dark. They stepped forward slowly, not yet sensing the danger. Daniel backed away toward the shed. The woman's voice came sharp from inside. "Now?" Daniel grabbed the largest lever and pulled it down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fence lit up with a blinding flash. Blue-white arcs of electricity jumped from the metal. The nearest hunter jerked violently, its body convulsing. Another tried to step back, but the charge leaped from the fence into the wet ground. The air filled with the sharp crack of power and the smell of burning metal. Charlie whooped from the doorway. "That's what I'm talking about." But the victory lasted only seconds. One of the hunters dropped to the ground, still twitching. The others staggered, but didn't fall. The woman's voice was urgent now. "They adapt." Again, Daniel's stomach sank. "Then we hit them harder." The woman adjusted more controls. The hum from the transformers rose to a deafening pitch. Daniel could feel the vibration in his bones. Outside, the hunters were moving again, slower but relentless. Their armor now glowed faintly, as if absorbing some of the energy. Suddenly, one raised its arm toward the shed. A beam of blue light shot forward. Slicing through the wall, sparks rained down, and Charlie dove aside. Daniel grabbed the woman's arm. "We can't stay in here." She looked at the controls one last time and pressed her palm flat against the main panel. Her skin glowed brighter, and the lights in the shed flared outside. Every transformer erupted in a burst of lightning. The hunters staggered again, their movements breaking apart into jerks and spasms. The ground shook as one of them collapsed completely, its body smoking. Go." The woman shouted. They ran from the shed toward the far fence. The energy still crackled in the air, making every hair on Daniel's arm stand up. Charlie found another weak section of the fence and tore it open. They spilled out into a side street, gasping for breath. Behind them, the hum of the substation began to fade. Daniel looked back in time to see two hunters still standing. "Damaged, but not destroyed. They're not stopping," he said. The woman shook her head. "They will follow until I am gone." "Or until they are." Charlie wiped sweat from his brow. "Then we find a way to finish them." Daniel glanced at the woman. "Can we?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes. But we need the other gates." Daniel frowned. "Other gates? As in, more of those things underground?" She met his gaze. "Yes. But some gates are weapons made to protect, not to open." The sound of metal footsteps echoed faintly down the street. The hunters were coming again. Daniel turned toward the city. "Then we find one of those gates, and we use it." The woman's glow brightened slightly. "You speak like my people did." "Before we lost our home," Daniel gave a small, grim smile. "Maybe your people never had humans on their side." They started moving again, slipping into the maze of streets. The rain had begun to fall once more, hiding their tracks. Somewhere ahead lay a hidden gate, and maybe, just maybe, the first real chance to turn the hunt around.